Morning, everyone.
Morning in progress.
Good morning, Daniel.
Morning, Daniel.
Morning.
Everyone.
Morning.
I could sing the little song.
I could sing the little song, Good Morning.
Morning to you. Good morning to you. You're all in your places with bright, shiny faces. Good morning to you. That was for the first graders.
Thanks, Bruce.
Well, it's 9:31. I'm wondering if we should get started since we have an appeal and we're going to try to really watch the time today.
It looks like the appeal will happen. I got confirmation, so this one will happen.
Okay. So Brian, Jen, okay if we get going now? Hearing no opposition.
That's fine. Yep.
Okay.
Whoa.
Okay, welcome everyone to the June edition of the Urban Forestry Commission. I'm Daniel Newberry. I'm sitting in for Vivek Chandas, who cannot make it this month. And also in advance, happy Juneteenth to everyone. And we've got an appeal going on, so I'm going to try to really keep us on schedule today. Let's start off with public comments. Brian, do we have anybody who has signed up for public comment today?
No one emailed me ahead of time. Let's see if there's anyone who's attending who wants to raise their hand to write a public comment. Otherwise, looks like we're good to keep moving.
Okay, I'll just give about another 30 seconds to see if somebody who's attending wants to contact Brian, let them know that they want to make a public comment. All right, hearing none, let's keep moving. The next item on our agenda is to review and approve our minutes. Do I hear or see a motion to approve the minutes? Or would everyone like another minute or two to read? Okay.
I'll provide a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay. We have a motion from Adrian. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Greg seconds. So we have a motion on the table. Before we vote, is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Let's take a vote. All in favor, please raise your real hand or your virtual hand through the minutes. Okay, so let's keep it up. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we have 8 commission members present, so it is unanimous. And For the record, that means we also have a quorum for today, so we can vote. Okay, thank you, everyone. That means we are ahead of schedule. This is great. Okay,
Go Daniel.
so the next item is the Forestry report. Jen, take it away.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks. First off, thank you so much to Daniel for being the chair du jour. And then I have 4 or so items for you. And I'm going to get them done in 10 minutes, so there's time for questions and contributions. First, happy Juneteenth, which is Saturday and commemorates the end of slavery in the United States in 1865, 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. There are Juneteenth celebrations in the Portland area, and since last year, Juneteenth is also a City of Portland holiday. So tomorrow, city offices are closed. Next item, so it's the halfway point of the calendar year, and for those of us in the budget world, the beginning of a new fiscal year is right around the corner. So I think it's a good time to recognize at least a few of the commission's recent accomplishments. And I know when you all are thinking about your role, sometimes I think you feel frustrated that you're not doing enough. And really, you're doing a lot and it's making a difference, which is one of the reasons I want to point out these accomplishments. So of late, these have included important and significant tree code amendments, such as reducing the per inch mitigation threshold and removing the industrial and commercial zone exemptions in development of city properties. Also, you were part of getting a plan approved by council for further amendments to the tree code and updating the Portland Urban Forest Management Plan. You've also been very influential in the Streets 2035 project and making it focus more on street trees as essential infrastructure in rights of way. Also improving the Better Housing by Design policy that the city recently implemented, and including tree goals in the economic opportunity analysis update, which hasn't been done before, and that work has just started, and trees are very much a part of it. And of course, there are more things that the commission has been influential on. So thank you for your work and your service. And as you see, there are a lot of things the commission has helped bring to fruition. On the project, a couple updates regarding upcoming agendas. So in the next month or two, we are expecting to have racial equity lens training led by the Bureau's Equity and Inclusion Manager and/or his team. Also on an upcoming agenda will be budget, which is very important every year. This year, that will also include further implementation plans for the 5-year operations levy. And then I'm going to move on to another item. This is kind of the last one, but this is about, I didn't give you this update. I'm sorry. I'm a little bit out of order. Forgive me. I've always been updating you on the Streets 2035 project and also our efforts to change the city's street tree maintenance policy. So this month, there's nothing new to report on those. They're still out there. There's just been no change from the last report. And then here's the last item I have for today, and that is regarding BES's tree planting program. In the previous meetings, it was shared that BES is reorganizing, Bureau of Environmental Services, has new managers in key positions, very new managers, and that Parks and Bureau of Environmental Services are working on coordination and information regarding the future planting plans that BES has. So to that end, I'd like to use the next few minutes to hear what information you commissioners might like regarding BES's tree planting plans. So the question of what's happening this coming winter, for example, what would you like to know about that for us to work on with the BES managers? And the questions should be germane to policy advice, the Urban Forestry Commission's role, and not operations, such as who does what activities, if that helps. So the rest of the time is for you all to bring your questions forward, please. And ask any questions about the other things I brought up.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Since this is an issue that we've all kind of weighed in on, what I'd like to do is just go around and give everyone a chance to weigh in. And if you choose not to, just go ahead and say, I pass. So I'm going to use kind of this Hollywood squares that I see on the screen to go around. And we're going to start with Bruce.
Okay, I'll get there. My question is regarding funding. Is BES committed to continuing its over $1 million a year for support of street trees? And if not, is that money lost completely, or is it going to urban forestry?
Thank you, Bruce.
Jen, I guess the format is just to ask the questions and you're going to write them down and get back to us at some point.
That's
Oh,
correct. Yeah, the reason we're doing this is there is such
Yep.
interest in the topic. And we are working on what is happening and things are in flux. And so it's helpful to hear from you all what information you'd like so we can help get that.
Great. Okay. Barbara, you're up next. And you're muted.
Bruce just got my question. Thank you.
Okay, great. So next will be Adrian.
Thanks. Yeah, so being new, I'm probably way behind speed on this. But my general questions would be what is the history of what's worked well and what's not worked well with collaborating, and how could we make that better? And then what's the overall vision of BES in terms of street trees, and how did they get to that? And again, is the way to make that vision more robust.
Great. Thank you, Adrian. Megan.
Adrian, I really appreciated that question, so thank you. And I have one quick question. Jen, will BES be sharing anything about their operational strategy, just so folks who may not be familiar can get some of that historical context?
Mhm. Yeah, that's the type of thing that we're working on now. And as I've said in the past, things are really in flux there. So we're finding that out too. So that is the goal.
Okay. My question would just be kind of, oh, hummingbird. Again, sorry, this happens when you work from home. Is akin to getting an idea of what their street tree planting strategy is moving forward on the various fronts of what they've historically done in terms of street tree, yard tree, et cetera. But also what that looks like in terms of inter-bureau relationships and community partners.
Great. Thank you, Megan. Damon.
So I am a contractor for the city of Portland, BES, and on this exact planting contract. And so I get to see a little bit deeper into things and hear some of the ruffling of feathers and whatnot. And one of the big things I've heard in the past has been just challenges with the permitting process for these for street trees. If BES is going to continue with permit or with street tree planting, I would just kind of, for my own sake, because it puts us further back in the season, is to make sure that we are seeing good cooperation between BES and urban forestry for getting those permits out in a timely manner. And then being able to, yeah, just kind of streamline that process.
Okay. And Damon, we should also recognize that you're also a contractor for parks, for trees,
That too.
right? Yeah, so it's both.
Great, thank you, Damon. Greg? Greg, you're muted.
Yeah, you're muted.
I had it set up, sorry. I appreciate Daniel's overall question. I would love to know a little bit more of a breakdown of what they have funded in the past. I believe actually they've supported Friends of Trees pruning efforts. And then in sort of more specifics, there's sort of general street tree planting support, but I'd also like to know what projects they still have underway. I've moved out of the Tabor to the River project, but I'd love to know how far that is from being completed and what other projects they have tentatively lined up. So places where they decided they couldn't separate stormwater from sewer, but they are doing, traffic calming, street tree planting, swales, sort of a more integrated approach. So I guess I'd like sort of, there's an overall money, but where does it go? What are those components? Does it include pruning as well as planting? That's it.
Great, thank you, Greg. Let's see, Leah.
I don't have any questions yet. Maybe by the end of this meeting, I'll have more questions.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Leah. And then I just have a couple brief questions too. So as these negotiations have been going on, a concern I have is to ask the question of both bureaus, are the same number of trees going to be getting in the ground? I'm just concerned that while the negotiations are going on, trees, both for equity and climate resiliency issues, may not be getting into the ground as fast as they could be. And so I want to ask that question. Can the bureaus make a commitment that the rate of trees is going to be getting in the ground at least as much as last year, assuming you have the budget to do that? And then just, a follow-up, want to put another plug in on the permits question, because I remember a month ago, Vivek and I had a meeting with Commissioner Mapps's office. And it looked to me like, both what I'm hearing from Commissioner Mapps's office and what I'm hearing from Jen, it sounds like the two bureaus are not necessarily on the same page. And I think it would be really helpful to get them get all the players in the same room together and just hammer some of this out, because I think that probably this can be taken care of much more quickly if everyone could get on the same page in terms of what they think they know. So I think it's just a little bit of miscommunication, and if everybody could get on the same page, I think this would get through a lot more quickly. So just my 2 cents and questions.
That's a good end note, because that is exactly what we're working on, getting everything on the same page.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, everybody. And did anyone have any other questions on any other parts of the forestry report?
Or other things I didn't bring up that are timely that you think? Bruce's hand is up. Sorry, I'll stop.
Yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
Jen, do you want to introduce our new urban forestry commissioner who's present?
Oh, Leah wasn't here last time. Thank you, Bruce. Daniel can help. Leah, welcome. Welcome to your first meeting. Leah Plack is one of our new commissioners. Yay! Leah, thank you so much for choosing to spend your precious time and energy serving on the commission and advising the city on tree policy. It's very important.
I'm
Leah,
excited.
do you want to, Daniel, if there's time, maybe does Leah want to say anything
I was gonna ask Leah if you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your interest in urban forestry and background,
Sure.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So my name's Leah and I am an educator. So I taught kindergarten. I've been a science specialist for many years, and in the fall, I'm joining the Portland Metro STEM Partnership to focus on STEM for elementary school and preschool. So I'm working on projects to get STEM kits to families that are served through the Early Learning STEM Hub here in Multnomah County. So I'm excited to be part of the commission, definitely focusing on tree equity as far as who has access to mature trees and all of the benefits that they provide. And I've heard that the commission's interested in more educational outreach to the public about the role of the Forestry Commission and what's happening, and just getting more of that back and forth. And so I'd be excited to be part of that conversation too.
Great. Well, thank you and welcome to the commission, Leah. Looking forward to working with you.
Likewise.
So next up, and we are 10 minutes ahead of schedule, so this is good because I know we have some topics coming up that are going to generate some conversation, but we had a recent change to the agenda. And part of it is there's been a lot of talk. I remember, Adrian, you sent in an email, if I remember correctly, about the South Park blocks issue. Am I remembering that right? I think so. And I've been hearing about this from a variety of groups. Bruce has been contacted by some individuals and by Trees for Life, but essentially this has to do with the South Park blocks master plan that was presented to us here at UFC maybe a year and a half ago. And there's going to be a vote coming up soon, as I understand, at the City Council. And there's some building opposition from some folks in Portland, and several of us, as you know, have been getting contacted. So we thought it would really be worth kind of hearing what the facts are, so it'll give us a better idea if and when we're contacted, we'll have some more information. So Jen, I believe we were going to have a visitor today. Is that right?
Yes, we are ahead and they're not
Right.
here yet, but we can talk about this in the interim until Tate White gets here. So yes, Daniel brought this up yesterday, and I think rightly, as he said, it's an issue that you all wanted to hear about. This is also really continuation of the project that you've already been involved in, not Leah and Adrian, of course, but hopefully you'll recall that the planning team for the South Park Blocks Master Plan came to the commission over a year ago. And thank you, Bruce, for recently recirculating the notes that you had taken during those meetings. And this is an area where, this is tree policy, so this is an appropriate area for the commission to give advice, and you did then. So that project has moved along, and yes, it's at a stage now where there is a final proposed South Park Blocks Master Plan that will be brought to council, city council. I believe it's around July 7th. And I just put in the chat an article from Oregon Live that was just sent my way this morning. So if you want to look at that, that's a pretty good synopsis, I think, in terms of media relations of what's been going on there. So in the past couple of weeks, there's, of course, in any master plan or any policy decision in the city, there are many different perspectives, and that's part of public policy and the democratic process, that all of those things hopefully get expressed and decisions are made at some point. But some folks have been very vociferous about opposing the plan. However, I would put it this way: opposing the plan for things that aren't in it. And a lot of it's been about like the city's plan to cut down the elm trees on the South Park blocks, which has never even been contemplated in my knowledge. And in my role, I certainly should know about that if that's happening. However, that's how some have chosen to portray this. And that's really where the kerfuffle arises from. So I don't know what else anyone wants to say. Daniel, do you want anything else to say about it before Tate arrives? Tate is the project manager and has been. She is the one who led the presentation to you all when it was at commission. And we asked her to attend because she is the authority on it rather than me. Although of course, Urban Forestry has been involved in the project. And she'll be able to give you a synopsis of where things are at, as well as answer questions and concerns you may have. She's also going to ask if the commission might want to submit some sort of a statement to City Council. And she's going to ask that it be in support of the plan. And I think that hadn't been anticipated because this reaction hadn't been foreseen. Yeah, go ahead, Daniel. And I see Barbara's hands up.
So I see Barbara's hands up. Barbara, before if I could just basically summarize what I see as some of the opposition. So as we know, the park blocks are really iconic. You know, it's something very special in the city of Portland. We have these super mature trees. We also know that they're, you know, basically planted at the same time. Some of them are starting to get toward the end of their lives. A lot of the elm trees are on life support. And in the parks plan, a big part of it talks about succession planning for these large trees. And my sense is that when you do that, people start thinking, wow, these trees are going to come down. If they're talking succession, that means they're planning on taking them down. And I think there's some confusion there. This plan is not really about intentionally cutting trees down. It's just for planning for the succession of these older trees.
That's right.
And part of that succession talks about what you're going to plant in the place, some of the maintenance, some of those issues. So that's kind of my rundown. I see that Barbara and I think Adrian, do you also have your hand up? Barbara, we'll start with you. And you can always press your space bar for temporarily unmuting. That's a good way to unmute.
Okay. What I would say, and this is responding to what Jen said, is I don't think I've heard verbally from people, and I don't think that the entire, and I think Daniel just addressed this a bit, I don't think the entire kerfluffle is about trees being removed. I think some of it is about changing an iconic and beloved place. You know, are you adding more concrete? Are you going to reduce the number of trees? Are you going to reduce the canopy? You know, are you going to put stuff in there that doesn't look like it belongs? And by that, I mean tree species. So I think there is some resistance to, you know, are you going to add a stage for, you know, concerts? Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? I think there's some resistance to changing some place that is much loved, much used. And I think, as Daniel said, people are not really tracking or clear on what the changes are and why.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. Did anybody else want to make a comment? Hands, anyone? Bruce.
I didn't have time yesterday, but there seemed to be from some of the folks who are very concerned, they're talking about the encroachment of the green loop trail, taking out a number of elm trees that are on the west side of the park. And there's totally contradictory information from one party saying, oh, those trees are coming out because of the right-of-way space. And then you hear from the other side, no, 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 we're only using the currently paved roads. And it's sort of like two people looking at the same information and saying completely opposite things. So I would like to believe what Parks is saying, but my plan is to go downtown with a measuring wheel and measure from the curb that's on the west side of West Park and measure to where the nearest elms are for about 10 blocks. because I don't know who to believe. They're saying completely different things. And one is what is he, a retired architecture historian or something like that? And the other is the manager, the planner that's in charge of the project. So it's baffling to me.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. I see that Tate has joined the meeting. Before we turn it over to Tate, any last questions from any commissioners? Okay, Tate, for the last few minutes, we just started discussing the South Park blocks, just in the context of trying to figure out what some of the public opposition has been. And so I think this would be a good opportunity. If you would introduce yourself and just give a brief context on the plan and then take it away.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you all for your time. My name is Tate White. I'm a senior planner with Portland Parks and Recreation. And for the past over 2 years, I've been project managing the South Park Blocks master plan. I've been working closely with Joel Smith from Urban Forestry, and Jim Cairo has also kindly been involved. As you may remember, the project team did voluntary briefings with you at the concept review phase. That was on January 16th, 2020. And then at the draft preferred design phase, that was July 16th, both 16ths. And your advice and guidance were extremely valuable to the project team. They really appreciated that. And I have appreciated seeing, emails going around as you guys have been contacted about this. There is unfortunately a lot of misinformation out there that we've been trying hard to correct. But it's, tree succession, a long-term vision for tree succession is very complex and nuanced. So I understand it can be hard for people to wrap their heads around. So I might just share my screen. I kind of came prepared to answer your questions, but I'd be happy to remind you of what the tree succession strategy is proposing. Would you like that?
Yeah.
I see nods.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to share my screen. Thank you all.
And Tate, I think it would also really be helpful because I'm sure you've seen some of these comments coming in from various folks who are taking issue here. If you could maybe address some of that, because we really want to be able to know how to respond to some of the comments.
Definitely. So I can do that. A lot of my kind of talking points related to this presentation are already kind of targeted to do that, but I will add on as appropriate. So the tree succession strategy for the South Park Blocks Master Plan provides a long-term guide for replacing trees when they naturally reach the end of their lifespans. So it does not recommend proactive removal. It balances goals for improving the growing conditions and resiliency of the urban forest while maintaining historic character and form of the trees. In response to concerns about negative impacts from this strategy, we want to be really clear that there is no proactive tree removal proposed, and more detailed design and construction practices at future potential implementation will work towards preventing unnecessary removal from park improvements and optimizing planting locations. So as a quick reminder, the tree succession long-term vision in the University District reinstates more symmetry and balance back to the planting design. It prioritizes locations towards the center for larger stature species, and then provides more opportunities for species diversity along the edges, including strategic locations for evergreen trees to provide more native species in this landscape again, and trees that can better process stormwater during winter months that will become even more rainy with climate change. I want to note the importance of honoring Indigenous traditions and values by reincorporating some evergreen trees, as well as other important native trees like Oregon white oak. There's more opportunity to do this in the University District, where tree character has already changed quite significantly. And then for the Cultural District, you can see in the existing conditions diagram at the top that we have a rather tight grid. And the consulting arborist on the project found that newly planted trees are struggling to establish under the shady canopy of the mature trees. If we were to plant this landscape today with large stature elm and elm-like trees, we would not plant them this close together. We also cannot replicate the mature canopy we have with these tree species and spacing today unless we did remove and replant them all at once to replicate their original planting conditions. That is not what we want to do here. So what we are trying to do is be strategic to give mature trees more time to reach the end of their lifespans and not replant every single location over time to enhance the growing conditions for surviving and new trees that are replacement trees. The long-term vision will take hundreds of years to achieve and reduce tree numbers by about 20% in order to sustain a healthy, resilient, and full canopy for future generations. So that's kind of my quick overview of the tree succession strategy again. I'm also going to show the next slide. So you might have heard that a lot of people are saying the green loop will take out trees, and that's definitely not our intention. These renderings were done by PBOT to help people visualize what is actually being proposed. The 5-foot pedestrian sidewalk serving parked cars is expanded into the current street parking space to become a 12-foot wide green loop path. A 6-foot wide planted buffer is then separates that path from one lane of moving traffic that could be retained in this concept. And this kind of extends the park-like character into the street. And so the intention here is to not impact the trees negatively at all. And then this kind of shows those dimensions on an existing photograph. And then this rendering shows what is actually envisioned here. The plantings are not exactly what the master plan is proposing, but it's a helpful visualization. And I want to note that urban forestry staff are on site, will be on site during future construction, and they will work to minimize potential damage to tree roots as per Title 11. So that's kind of my quick go through. Just so you guys know, there's another concept for the green loop that removes more regular vehicle traffic. And so that would allow the green loop to be even farther away from the trees. And that's right there. So that's in the appendix to the plan. And City Council will have the opportunity to tell us to explore it further if they would like. It's also a really great alternative to people that do have concerns about tree root impacts. So I'll stop talking. Do you have any more questions for me?
Okay, why don't we do what we were doing earlier, which is we'll go around and give everyone the opportunity. I'm seeing Adrian, you had your hand up really quickly. We'll start with you this time around.
Hi. Yeah, a few questions and thoughts. I'm also on the Portland Parks and Rec board, so I've been hearing some different things from that direction as well. And one sort of the larger question that I have is, what is the main impetus of a new plan at all? I mean, I've read what's in the documents and so forth, but I would, I'd just like to hear it from your perspective. Are the trees the main driver? Or it's very clear that we're moving to, in my view, more of a world-class type of a plan. So, I think there's many, many positives, but if you would address that, I would appreciate that. Because I think, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Thanks for the question. It's a good one. So this was actually kind of started or initiated by the Design Commission. Because when they were reviewing, doing design review for the Broadway Tower development that's on Broadway between Columbia and Clay, they were asking for more density. And so they had to provide public benefit contributions. And so the Design Commission decided that with more density coming in the area, it would be good to have more guidance for the South Park blocks. And so they asked for that developer to fund a planning process to provide a comprehensive vision for all 12 blocks, because we've never had a comprehensive vision for all 12 blocks. They were both redone kind of separately, each half of the 6 blocks. And so the impetus really came from the Design Commission, but I wasn't here at the time, but my understanding is it was also done with an awareness that, we were losing some of the most mature trees and that we wanted to have, more guidance for how to replant them and how to, protect and sustain the urban forests of the South Park blocks.
Mhm. I'll just make a comment that I think it's a difficult situation. So the naysayers are really, in the end, very much saying, why does this have to change, right? And so if the answer is, well, we had funding for a plan, it's, it's a little tough to answer that in a way that's compelling. It doesn't mean we
It's true.
get to something better through the planning, because I think we probably did. Anyway.
It's talent. We ideally would like to have a plan for all our parks. So it was an opportunity, but acceptance of the plan does not dedicate funding for the project. They will go on our capital improvements list. And so they will move forward when citywide priorities, support them moving forward. So equity considerations and everything will be included in that.
Yeah.
Barbara, did you have, am I allowed to call people? I see Barbara has a question.
Yeah, I do. I wanted to know, am I muted?
Oh, no.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just wanted to know, Tate, if you heard the comments that that I made and that Daniel made and that Bruce made relative to the confusion around this. Did you catch those comments? Were you at your
Sorry,
screen
I was
at that
in
point?
another meeting. I don't think
She wasn't here for that.
Oh, okay. So I didn't see your screen go on, so I wasn't sure when that happened. And I mean, if everybody else could make their own comments, but to kind of paraphrase what I heard from all three is there's quite a bit of concern, and a lot of it is relative to, and I've seen the letters and everything that have been written into the city, and then the city's responded. I think a lot of this is relative to the confusion, and Adrian kind of mentioned this too, the confusion as to why we are doing this and why we are changing this beloved iconic space. And I think that, maybe marketing or, talking about the whys behind, why we would take this space and change it in such a way would benefit the project and benefit those of us that are getting comments. So that would be my comment.
Okay. Yeah. So would you like more messaging related to that?
Well, it would appear that the public, and of course there are a lot of misconceptions swirling around, but I don't know that they're all misconceptions. Some of them I think are just, they're changing it, and I don't know what, they're going to change my favorite place to go on Saturday morning, or whatever the comment might be. I just made that up. But I think the fact that change is coming and it's unclear what and why that change is, I think there's a big kind of vacuum there among the residents of Portland. That's what I think. So I'm not asking for comments myself, because we've had a couple of presentations. I'm mentioning the fact that I think the public in general who is getting wind of this, they don't understand it and they don't know why.
Okay, doing a time check here. We're getting kind of toward the end of where we need to be. Greg, I see you have your hand up. You have a question?
Well, I guess I have an overall comment, and this is where, I haven't worked at the Parks Bureau for 10, 12 years, but I was in the same position that Tate was for 15 years. And while I only worked with urban forestry when I had a specific park project, and we needed their input, from the beginning through the kind of final review, all of us who are landscape architects were observing that, particularly in our older parks, whether it was Laurelhurst or Kenilworth or Peninsula, these parks that are over 100 years old, and the South and North Park blocks are definitely among them. It's a problem trying to maintain canopy as trees die. And we were seeing trees being planted as spaces were open. So there'd, be a succession. And yet when there's big, huge trees and all their roots and all their shade, very hard for the young trees to succeed. So I think maybe this is an opportunity for the city and urban forestry to really talk about tree replacement or succession in these, I mean, many of them are iconic places. And it's going to be a growing problem because, some of them didn't ever have plans. And I definitely agree that it's really hard doing these things piecemeal without a budget when you just have lost a couple of trees in a storm or something. So I don't know how, once you've kind of got behind the public message, that you catch up and correct it. But I think maybe we'll learn something that we can apply on these other parks, because I'm having lived near Laurelhurst most recently, there's been some big trees coming down there, and the diversity has been reduced over time, and so on and so forth. So I think the parks tree inventory could be a really important tool here to really, do analysis. And I know urban forestry's got all that data, but I don't know, and they're staffing up, but it's a real need. Because we get a lot of focus on getting trees where we lack canopy, but I definitely don't want to lose it where we have it now. That's
Okay,
it.
great. Thanks, Greg. We're kind of out of time. Megan, do you have a quick question?
Yeah, it's more just a comment that echoes some of the other things. I'll be expedient. One thing I've appreciated, and Tate, I appreciate just the work that you're doing, is kind of maybe some more public framing around both looking forward and backward, right? I think that some of our framing looks backward only so far, and I know that there's a emphasis in this project to look further back. And I think that's really important to speak to the Indigenous history of this region. And I've gotten some personal comments about also frustration around evergreen trees versus deciduous trees. And I think there's also just some tree related to other points, education needed for folks, right? People get really attached to trees and don't necessarily have this larger contextualization of a tree as a living being. And that means, like us, there's a start and an end. So I just wonder if we're looking back and that looks back to the history of this park, but also beyond, and we're looking forward. And I just am curious if that could be an interesting framing that involves some education in it as well. So that's my quick thought comment.
Okay, thank you, Megan. We're out of time, but Tate, I understand you were maybe hoping to have the Urban Forestry Commission send something to City Council in support of the plan. We don't really have time today to really get into talking about, what some kind of letter would be, but I'm just wondering, one option we have, because of course the City Council is going to be meeting before we have our next meeting, so we don't have the opportunity to go do a letter, come back, vote on it, that kind of thing. I'm just wondering if we could get a show of hands here from commissioners. Is this something we might want to try to do? I mean, this is something perhaps if the commission could give the policy committee some direction at our meeting next Monday, which of course is open to everyone, we could try to craft something. But I'm just wondering, is this something commissioners might want to do? In other words, support the master plan? And if so, are there certain caveats or issues we'd want to bring up? Is this something folks would like to have the policy committee pursue? I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. So it seems like we're 5, maybe. Seems like we're not totally on board. But then again, we also don't know exactly what we're going to be saying, which is a big question. I'm kind of getting that maybe this might be premature. I don't know. I mean, we sort of have both sides.
Well, and
Bruce?
if I could
Oh,
just
go ahead.
make a final comment, it could be just an education opportunity. It doesn't have to be solely focused on support, but we've tried really hard through this process to educate people and provide correct messaging, and it just can be really challenging when you're dealing with change and tough issues. So coming from Urban Forestry Commission, it just might be helpful in educating the public. So just to say that.
Okay, boy, we're already way over
Yeah.
time, and we have a lot of other things that potentially could also take some time. So I don't want to really take up any more time here. I'm thinking this might be one of those cases where we just might not have enough time to decide what we're going to do in terms of a letter of support. But perhaps what we could say was if individual commissioners would like to write letters to the city council and even say something like, this came to our attention really late and we haven't had time as a commission to talk, but I personally, this is what I think. Does that seem like an okay position for folks? Okay. Thank you, Tate.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Tate.
Okay. Great. So we have to jump right into Title 11 amendments, and Brian and Nick are going to take this one on. And just as a reminder, everyone, this is something that's come up several times going back well over a year to city council meetings, but it's getting close now, at least for that first few pieces of the Title 11 for this first phase. But go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, thanks. So as y'all know, we presented back on May 26th to City Council for a scope of work that would both make some changes to Title 11 in the near term before moving on to updating the Urban Forest Management Plan. And then that would be followed by some more significant changes to Title 11, which would be informed by that updated plan. So Nick and I wanted to give you a quick update and brief you on the first phase of that, the initial changes to Title 11. And Nick is actually going to kind of take the lead from here. I figured you've heard from me enough over the years that I'd let Nick run with this. And Nick, how about I'll share the PowerPoint, and then do you want to talk through the slides?
Sounds good.
Cool.
Hey, everybody. Good to see old friends and to meet some new folks. My name is Nick Desai. I'm a botanic specialist with Urban Forestry. I work in our science outreach and planting work group. And I have to say, I'm actually in my home office. My dog has been quiet for the past half hour, but as I start presenting, I'm sure he's going to start barking. So excuse the interruption if it occurs. So just get this situated here. So today, Brian and I are presenting an informational update on the tree code amendment process. We're going to provide a few examples of the types of updates involved in the first phase of our project. And we're going to provide an overview of how the UFC will be involved. So a bit of background, most of you are familiar, but a little bit of a recap. In 2020, City Council directed certain tree code improvement actions which have been completed and resulted in amendments to Title 11. Also in 2020, Council directed development of a high-level scope of work for further tree code amendments and to identify related funding needs. So we're going to report on that scope of work, which Council approved just a few weeks ago. The proposed scope of work has 3 sequential parts. And a quick side note, this is a pretty short presentation we can take. We'll have plenty of room for questions right afterwards. So the proposed scope of work has 3 sequential parts. Phase 1 addresses technical and minor policy amendments. These do not require data analysis and will make clarifications and simple improvements, primarily to non-development regulations. Phase 1 can be achieved with existing resources, and work has started already and will be completed in early 2022. Phase 2 will update the urban forest management plan. It will include significant outreach and engagement with partner bureaus, stakeholders, and the community over about 2 years. Phase 2 requires new resources, including staff, and we'll be developing estimates of the funding needs over the next year. Phase 3 will develop more substantive amendment proposals, which will involve data analysis and new public and interbureau engagement. Importantly, Phase 3 builds upon and is informed by the updated urban forest management plan, which will be completed in Phase 2. Of course, we'd like to be able to do all of this as soon as possible. However, only Phase 1 can be achieved with existing capacity, and the other phases rely on the new resources yet to be obtained. It's also important to note that this scope of work, this multi-phase approach, follows the city auditor's recommendation published in the 2017 Tree Code Implementation Audit Report. And the recommendation was that substantive amendments be based on an updated urban forest management plan. And as you might know, the UFMP was last updated in 2004. It should be updated at least every 10 years, so it's well overdue. Community guidance collected over the past 5 years, which are the first years of Title 11 implementation, played a significant role in shaping the multi-phase approach and helped us to define and identify our Phase 1 goals and the updates to pursue. This collection of community guidance has been an intentional effort for the very purpose of review and improvement for our city code, tree code. Key feedback benchmarks include in 2016, an oversight advisory committee convened by the Parks Commissioner and created to report and provide recommendations for code improvements. Extensive data collection, including surveys and analysis from the first year of implementation, which are compiled and reported in 2016. Issues and needs have been routinely documented since code implementation began. We have a running list of those. Growing a more equitable forest, which is a 2-year stakeholder-based project resulting in the first city tree planting strategy completed in 2018. Surveys, various surveys of Portlanders collected through urban forestry and through Portland Parks and Recreation. Public input from the recently adopted tree code amendment process, which occurred over the past year and a half, and advice from the Urban Forestry Commission and the Planning and Sustainability Commission, along with direction and comments from City Council. So the community input from these resources or these sources resulted in these goals for Phase 1 amendments. Reminder, these are the technical and minor policy amendments. And our goals are to improve efficiency and regulation, resolve inconsistencies within the tree code and with other city codes, provide tools for better implementation, and to ensure that the tree code aligns with city policies, including an updated urban forest management plan, citywide tree planting strategy, and Portland's climate action plan. And now we're going to provide just a few examples, a taste of what those Phase 1 technical and minor amendments or updates would look like. And so here are some examples. These are clarifying amendments, and let's see. So allow city forester to approve removal of dead heritage trees. Currently, removal of dead heritage trees requires a UFC process, which can cause delays for property owners. Allowing the city forester to approve removal as she can for dangerous heritage trees would improve efficiency, timeliness, and provide better public safety. Clear up discrepancy between Title 11 and Title 33 regarding pruning trees in greenway zones. Currently, Title 11 references pruning requirements in Title 33 for overlay zones, but not greenway overlay zones. This appears to have been an oversight and could be made more consistent in Title 11. Allow certain extensions for admin review processes. Currently, Title 11 allows 15 days for the responsible party to apply to have a code violation reviewed or reconsidered, We've seen that this can be too little time, and we'll look to extending the timeline in certain situations, similar to the code hearings officer's ability to do so in other code. And final example here, including public nuisance in our definitions. The term public nuisance is used in the tree code, but it is not defined. We'll look at defining it to be consistent with the definition in other city codes. And so all of these are examples of amendments in phase 1, which will not require additional resources, little steps towards making our code more efficient. And so my final slide here is to provide an overview of how the UFC will be involved. So today is a briefing and discussion opportunity to hear your feedback on this process. And we invite you to submit additional potential amendments. You can email myself or Brian. We're leading this project. We'll come back to you in August with the full amendment list. So between now and then, we're working internally with urban forestry staff, tree inspectors, particularly to get an idea of what they're seeing out in the field and how we can approach the wording for the improvements that we're proposing. And then in winter 2021, there'll be another briefing on the amendment text itself and a public hearing. So keep in mind that the full list will be about 35 items. We're looking at 30 to 40 items. So it's a big list. We're going to provide you with lots of time to take a look at it. And the process is, it seems like, well, it's a year. It's almost a year. It's less than a year. Sorry, we're getting back to council in early 2022, but the time's going to move fast. And there will be a process with city attorneys to review the language. So with that, I'll open it up to discussion or questions, and Brian and I and Jen can probably answer most of them. I think Rick Faber is here as well with our permitting and regulation group to help.
Okay, thank you, Nick. And before we go to questions, just want to clarify the input you're looking for today. How much in detail are you interested in getting comments on? Because Brian sent out, we have like a list of some of these potential items. And I'm guessing people may have specific issues on those particular items. Did you want that kind of information? Are you also looking for information about new items? I know you said you wanted email on those, but we have about 20 minutes. I'm thinking we could do a round robin again, but if you want to just give us a little more on what you're looking for today as opposed to in the future.
Sure, all of the above are fair game. So yeah, we're happy to jot down notes on any ideas that you have today, and we're happy to answer any questions too.
Okay, how about if we start with Greg, and I'm putting you on the spot, Greg, because I saw in that list there were several heritage tree items on the list.
You know, I would need to look at the list a little more carefully. I've been focusing on actually being out in the field looking at the nominations for both this year and last year. So we're behind, but you will hear from me in July. We've got a totally dead heritage tree that's standing, and at least that first point of letting the city forester just have, you know, allow them to be listed. I'm totally in support of that. I think it would save the committee's time and the commission time, and certainly be much better in our relationships with the owners of those trees. But yeah, I need to look at the list. I just had to set it aside.
Okay, great. Leah.
I just had one question about, I see here, deem a tree dangerous because it's likely to injure or damage the health of the urban forest. Could you just quickly, or maybe this could happen offline, like explain how a tree might damage the urban forest, or like what that refers to?
Yeah, and actually I see Jen has her hand raised up on that one.
Go ahead, Jen.
Muted every day, got to do it once. I think that's probably not the best language there. I don't think trees damage each other. I mean, they could, I guess something could fall onto another tree, but I call that forest life. Rather, it should be something like damaging people, property, those sorts of things.
That makes more sense to me. Thank you.
I've got
Damon.
nothing to add there. Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
There's also the consideration of insects and disease and pathogens. There's a whole section on DED, but it doesn't really address other things. So imagine we get the outbreak of Asian longhorn beetle in the maples. We're going to want to consider the maples that are infested as dangerous, because if we don't take them down, they will damage the urban forest.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I wasn't thinking of that. That's a big deal. That's a really big deal. We do that currently with Dutch elm disease. Infected elm trees get removed so that it doesn't spread. Containment strategy.
Great, thanks. Damon, you're next.
I would say on the dangerous tree language, I'd like to see that align a little bit more with current tree risk assessment language, and set some thresholds and whatnot, kind of flesh that out according to the accepted industry standards.
Okay, great. Adrian?
Yeah, I mostly pass. I just want to say it seems like a reasonable plan and time frame and so on. So looks good.
Great, thank you. Barbara?
I'm in the same place Greg is I'd like to see the list, because, you know, periodically over the year we talk about, you know, we should add this to the list, and I'm kind of wondering where that is these days.
Okay, did you see the list that was sent out with the packet this month? There was a list of potential changes for Title 11.
I've just added a link to it in the chat too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that list. I wasn't sure if that was all inclusive for urban forestry or not.
Yeah, I can clarify. That's not the full list. Those are sort of the amendments that we feel kind of most confident with in terms of moving forward, and are really meant to be examples of the types of amendments that we're considering in this. So it was also kind of help inform if you all have any ideas for additional amendments. This would kind of provide some sort of parameters for that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks, Barbara and Brian. Megan.
Thanks, Daniel. And I'll just note that I think maybe Damon has a follow-up question after. But I thank you, Nick. Nice to see you. I recognize that this is also a phased approach, which I want to be thoughtful of, right? Like there's initial kind of the low-hanging fruit concept and not. I also just want to recognize that some folks on the commission were really heavily involved in the Title 11, you know, kind of process to get it where it is, and others of us were not. And code can be a complex thing to navigate. So I guess it's more of a, I've read it and I understand it to a degree, but I think I don't know how to create opportunities to engage folks deeper, to really feel like there is an understanding of Title 11 as a commission, so that then we can really bring our best selves forward for the larger process. So I don't know what that means exactly. I just want to ensure that, because I think if we don't have that, we may not be as successful as we could be.
Great, thanks, Megan. Damon, going to get to you in just a sec, but I think we haven't heard from Bruce yet. Want to give Bruce a chance.
When looking at what Brian sent out to us, there's one about clarify that injuring a regulated tree is a prohibited action. I wondered if the terminology that's there, would that include damaging a tree from the application of Roundup to the trunk of the tree. Or more generally, a misapplication of a pesticide to a regulated tree. And I'm not sure a tree on private property is regulated if it's over 20 inches in diameter. So I'm just throwing that out.
Okay, great. Damon, you had a follow-up question?
Yeah, just looking a little further, I should have mentioned this before. Under enforcement authority, you have allowing liens to be placed on property when a violation is not resolved. I would posit that we should also explore, while we're having the lawyers explore liens, placing liens on development projects until there's a certain established that the required mitigation trees are established, and make sure that they're taking care of those young trees. They just kick off the truck and into the hole, and yeah, and then those go to fail. So if we could add that in there, that'd be fantastic, I think, for the urban forest.
That's a great comment. Rick, with that, I know there is a section of code that speaks to performance guarantees. I wonder if that would actually be allowable kind of under that existing authority.
Yes. So based on what was just said, I think that's already covered in code. It's a question of implementation and staffing. So I believe the code already does that. We can always take a closer look just to make sure that the way that we envision the implementation is covered, but it's an implementation question. For what it's worth, there is a similar situation that's already built into contracts for public works permits, where there's a 2-year warranty period for all public works permits, and the trees are in that as well, and that's bonded and insured as well. So it'd be doing a similar thing for other tree planting situations.
I think in the past we've talked about this, and there was some reticence to provide or to hold the developer's feet to the fire.
Yeah, and I think that's what needs to be explored as far as code goes, is it'd be easy to hold them up until the point of final. By easy, I mean being able to implement it. And then the more challenging thing is when the building is occupied and ownership changes hands, and then you have that street tree for the next 2 years. They do it for public works through the contracts. And that's the challenge that we'd have to explore with the code.
All right, Nick, looks like you have your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Daniel. I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments. One, I've added notes to our working document for some of the suggestions provided, including Bruce's about misapplication of herbicides and some of Damon's comments. And also Megan brought up a good point about how to learn more about Title 11. The first edition of our Title 11 had a commentary section on the side pages, which I found to be really helpful for learning about the code. The code has been updated and a few different iterations of the code have been put out there. And so not all of the updates have additional commentary, but I think that sharing that document, that original document, might be very helpful for commissioners to get a good overview.
Great, thanks, Nick. I think we've gone around the room, although I have a few small comments myself. If I could take a minute or two, just looking at the list, I'm going down the list. So bullet point number 3, remove dangerous heritage trees without UFC consent. I'm gathering this is about expediency. At some point, Greg, love to hear your thoughts on that. Number 4 was about restricting new information being submitted at an appeal hearing. I'm always a little bit nervous when we talk about not allowing information to be submitted. So at some point, I would like to hear a little more about that. I'm not sure we have enough time today. Item number 5, the way I read this is that we'd want to leave dead, dying, or dangerous trees in place, smaller trees, because it's going to compromise. I assume the word comprise really means compromise the larger trees. So question about that. And then my final one, Bruce got to that. I was going to say add poisoning to the list of prohibited actions. So anyway, those are my comments. And I don't know if Nick, if you wanted to comment on any of those that I raised, or I can just put that in an email and send that to you later.
I've added, so I've taken some notes on your comments, and we will follow up with you if you have further questions. But if you have further ideas, feel free to send them along.
And I can clarify the new information at an appeal. The permit decision is based on the information provided at the time, the sort of current conditions. And basically, if new information is brought up in an appeal that wasn't considered, the appeal is essentially over because that triggers a new permit review process. So the amendment would simply, rather than sort of disrupting the proceeding, it just wouldn't allow new information at all. So it's more of a process issue.
Okay, so you're thinking that there's no kind of information that could potentially be relevant that couldn't have been anticipated? I
see Barbara's hand up, and since she's the appeals board chair, I'll let her.
Okay, Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing with the appeals is we have had appellants who have brought in information to the hearing. And the problem with that is you've got, the city staff, the attorney, and the appeals board sitting there. Not everybody always has all the information, and not everybody has a chance to read it in the hearing. So, if they can't send it in, like a couple days in advance so that Brian can get it out to us, it makes it really difficult. You almost can't use it because you don't have time to, you don't have time to read it. So that's one thing. The other thing that I wanted to is that, does that help?
Yeah, I mean, that helps me understand. I was just wondering if there are any possible scenarios in which information truly is brand new and it's not just a stalling tactic by an appellant or something like that.
Well, I've been doing this for 7.5 years, and I have not seen any new information that has helped the hearing any. So my question also is that Brian and Nick, is Nick doing this? There's a difference in the color on this sample. What is the significance of the white and the green? Because it's not every other. Because you've got the third one and the fourth one are both white. I'm failing to grasp that.
There is no significance at all. They were every other before I started moving around the Excel rows, and this is what happened.
Okay, that's all I needed. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we're pretty much on schedule here. We just have about 3 minutes left. I'm wondering if Nick or Brian or Jen have any final comments here.
I'll just respond to Greg, put in the chat if we can get the full list of amendments. Absolutely, that is totally the plan. We're kind of going through a bit of an internal process first to kind of vet all of them first before we start to talk about them more. But that is absolutely what we have planned.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Nick, for joining the meeting today, and Brian for helping get this together. It sounds like we're going to have plenty of time to continue to talk about this. And just to repeat, every commissioners, get your input to Nick. We have Nick's email. So, and maybe somebody can put that in the chat. Just, I mean, I'm sure, I know we have it, but just in case anybody doesn't have it, we could do that.
Thank you. I'll add my email to the chat. Appreciate your support. It was good to see you all. Thank you.
Great. So We have about, let's see, 25 minutes if we need it to talk about Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland discussion. Before we start this off, Jen, did you want to introduce any of this? Bruce and I can certainly talk about what's happened at the policy committee, but I thought maybe you could introduce this.
Yes, I can do that. So Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland is a project running right now by Portland Parks and Recreation to review and update what are the Bureau's goals, mission, vision? What is it that Portland Parks and Recreation does? And I've been in service with Parks now for over 9 years. We have not done this type of a project before. So I think it's really exciting and it's a great opportunity. I also want to point out that the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland project aims to center BIPOC communities, as do many of the responsibilities and services that Parks tries to provide to Portlanders, such as the city's tree planting strategy. Growing a more equitable forest is very focused on that area. Tree education, employment, and community forest stewardship programs, and increasingly city advisory bodies like the Forestry Commission itself. Excuse me, frog in my throat. Also, in the context of the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland initial presentation that was at the last meeting that our director Adina Long brought and the consultant team brought, I know Bruce afterwards gave some information in his notes, including some budget numbers. And I wanted to update that a bit because, as the saying goes, show me your budget and I'll tell you what you value. And this project is all about values, right? So 8% of Portland Parks and Recreation's positions are currently allocated to things urban forestry. 5% of Portland Parks and Recreation's discretionary budget is currently allocated to the urban forest. So with that said, a little very brief review of some of the things you heard at the previous meeting and presentation on Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. The project is on a pretty quick timeline, so it's expected to conclude in this calendar year. And there are many parts of it moving at the same time. And the presentation of the project rather will be coming back to the commission for review of progress made, hopefully reflection. It will reflect what the commission has already commented on and advised on. And there'll be time at that point also for further discussion and advice. Prior to that, there is an opportunity and a request from Parks for commissioners to staff 2 of 4 work groups that are part of Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. And those 2 committees or work groups, one of them is called Mission, Vision, and Values. The other one is called Actions and Outcomes. And from the project overview, Mission, Vision, and Values, this is what you saw last time, but of course I wouldn't expect you to have this in mind. Mission, Vision, and Values is what are we committed to? The group provides clear statements to guide the vision of Portland Parks and Recreation. The other group, Actions and Outcomes, again, the overview of what that group will do is what are we focused on right now? Identifies Portland Parks and Recreation's actions and how results will be measured, looking for measurable outcomes. Those 2 work groups, we would like a commissioner to represent and serve in each of those work groups. The groups are both currently started to begin work in August. And they're still developing specifics about the 2 groups. So things that are important to you, I'm sure, like time commitments. What is the actual work scope? So more definition around those broad descriptions I gave you. And I've requested that we have that information prior to the July regular commission meeting. So hopefully we'll be able to send it to you all in the first week or 2 of July. So that said, it's up to you if you want to discuss and vote now on representatives, or if you'd rather wait for more information, because that is planned. Is there any other framing that you would like, Daniel?
Oh, I guess, I think for a lot of folks, just understanding what the time commitment is going to be like and the time period over which this extends is probably going to be something people would want to know before they commit to it. So, I guess at this point, I mean, is this something that anybody sort of is thinking about? Any of the commissioners sound interesting? I'm seeing a possible from Damon, probably wanting more information. Anyone else?
Daniel, one thing I just commented this, it's made a comment. I know that like Ann Jeanette's not here and Vivek isn't here and others. So yeah, Lorena. And so it just, I have a hesitancy for us to like vote without them having the opportunity and knowledge of whether it would be something they'd be interested in.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking maybe we'd vote, just wanted to see what kind of interest there is, because I also don't think it's fair to ask people to sign up for something we don't even really understand what the total commitment is quite yet. But as Jen said, things are moving a little slowly. They're going to be ramping up. So we probably have, What I'm thinking, Jen, is if you or Brian maybe could just send an email out to everybody, including the folks who weren't here, and just let them know about the opportunity, and that at the next meeting, we hope to nominate and elect representatives. I'm seeing a couple of hands here, Greg, and then Adrian.
I think Adrian might have been first, but I just have a quick question. I was not able to be at last meeting. So is this Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland like a first phase of an update to the 2020 vision plan?
Great question. That's a great question, Greg. It's actually, the 2020 vision plan is subsumed by Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. Here, I'm trying to meet with you in person and gesturing at you. This is really like, what does parks do? And then things like vision plans, budget allocations, policies, procedures, organization would change as needed, if needed, to reflect what parks' mission, vision, and values is, right? So things like level of service plans, Greg, which I know you're familiar with in your past professional life, would be informed by and supporting what's learned and decided through Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. Does that help?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great. Adrian.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that although I'm interested in both these committees, I actually joined the Planning and Infrastructure Subcommittee of Portland Parks and Rec. So that may be a good place for me, in a sense, to in part represent the Urban Forestry Commission view. And so maybe it would be better if others were interested to sort of join these other subcommittees. It would be good to see, obviously, more detail before we make decisions.
Just to clarify, right? Adrian, I think you're referring to the committee of the Parks Board.
Correct.
Right. So the Parks Board has some committees, as the Forestry Commission does, and one of them is that one.
Yeah, so we'll be getting, obviously a lot of information on this. So.
Okay. Bruce.
I understand it's too early to have specific people in specific groups, but I do think it's still very timely to send a memo to Adina Long expressing our strong interest that the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland clearly address trees as part of their work. And this can be done very tactfully, but I nevertheless think it's important that it go there because we didn't see that at all in what they presented at our last meeting. And I don't think we should let go of that.
Bruce, I think this is next up on our discussion for today. Maybe it's time to transition to that. So last month, the policy committee took up this issue. I think everyone will remember when Dina Long at last month's meeting gave the presentation. Quite a few of us commented to her and the consultants in the meeting, hey, wow, you're coming to the Urban Forestry Commission talking about this overall parks vision, and you didn't even mention the word tree once. Trees weren't in any of the issues that you presented to us, and we're the Urban Forestry Commission. Hey, what's going on? And quite a few of us mentioned that at the meeting. So what the policy committee did is, and thanks to Bruce who put together the first draft after receiving the committee's comments, was just kind of a nice poke saying, hey, Director Long, you know, we really do think you should consider trees a little bit more than we got at the last meeting. And in particular, and this was an issue that, this was a response we got from Dina Long and at the meeting was that, you know, we can't really at this point add questions to our stakeholders that we ask about trees because we've already started, and that would compromise the statistical validity of the questions we're asking. And one of the things we're saying in the letter is, you know, that really doesn't cut it. In fact, you could add new questions and just add those of all the stakeholders you still have to contact. And you could even go back and ask some of the other stakeholders, but really trees need to be considered here for both equity reasons and climate resiliency reasons. So did everybody have a chance to see the letter, the draft letter? I guess we could start off and see if any folks had any questions about the letter. Adrian, I see you have your hand up. And then Barbara after that.
Sorry, I actually forgot to put my hand down from the last time, but since I perennially have questions, I'll go ahead. So I'll just make one comment. I liked the letter. I like the idea of sending a letter. I think we could embellish it a little bit more with sort of the opportunities of trees and, you know, creating continuous green spaces and, you know, health effects and just like a few more lines, right? I wanted to say that I did have the opportunity at the retreat for Portland Park, for the Parks Board to actually sort of reiterate some of our thoughts about them come to us and our disappointment about the lack of the word trees and so on. And so unfortunately, you know, that, I mean, we don't have to get into the details of this, but, you know, they have some external consultants, right, who created this method. And so they're a bit dug in. And in fact, the Parks Board was submitted to the same exact method where it was just these very general questions, right? And you went in on your phone or what have you into this website to put in the answers. So just as a FYI, one of the things I mentioned is actually I've done this kind of qualitative work professionally. And then the most important thing is when you go into a new group, you really don't know what the right questions are. And so having open-ended kinds of ways of asking initially, and even if you want to use a website or have more quantitative things later to minimize that part, again, just to give you a bigger perspective. So they're first going into, you know, community groups that represent, you know, very disadvantaged folks and culturally diverse and so forth. And so they're going to have way more troubles than they had with us going in with that method. Anyway.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. So we've got Barbara and then Megan.
Oh, gee, for once I'm not muted. So I think that my issue with what happened with that survey is that not only did they come to the Urban Forestry Commission with little to nothing on trees, closer to nothing actually, but they went to the public. And I think that that was a really poor representation of who Parks and Recreation is and is supposed to be. The other thing is that questions lead to answers. So oftentimes if you're going to ask a question, you can lead people to the answer. Well, they may or may not get responses related to trees because that wasn't part of the question. The other thing is that in reading the letter, which I would agree, Daniel, was a gentle, kind of nice, sweet, poke, it didn't quite seem clear enough to me that, I followed it because I was in the presentation, I sat through the presentation, but it's not quite clear to me that in just reading the letter that street trees, park trees, that this is part of the network of parks in the city of Portland. It's not just what is in the defined space of a park. Part of the network extends out. Urban forestry, has a strong management role there, but it is part of the network of parks. So they are essentially cutting off their, part of their mission in not helping people understand that and asking people about different kinds of management. There are a lot of things that, could come up from that, but it is part of who they profess to be. You wouldn't know that from the questions, but it wasn't quite clear to me that that's all part and parcel of that part of the city.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Megan?
Bruce, I want to start by thank you for drafting this. I really appreciate that in general. And one thing I would say, in some ways it echoes other things, but I almost wonder if one thing we should lead with, which I think I'm hearing Barbara and Adrian say, is from all of the presentations that we've had from parks specifically coming, trees are essential to how people view parks, right? And what they value in our city. And so I think even speaking to that directly in this letter is really essential, right? It's critical, and to the comments that we often make, and people don't understand the connection necessarily inherently between parks and the management of not only street trees, but trees in general in the city. And so I think taking the opportunity to say, A, trees are one of the most valued things by people in the city, let alone in parks, right? And how they view parks. B, because people don't understand that, we have to make certain that people understand the role that trees play in parks, like as a bureau, right? And so I think we need to draw those explicit connections in if we're taking the opportunity to do that, to speak to that. And I love, Bruce, even just the speaking to linear, the miles of linear tree parks. And I would wonder, and I want to realize you wrote this and I didn't. So kudos to you on that, but just speaking to trees more broadly, right? Like to not end just at street trees because they're one part of it, but it is just trees in general, and the role of trees. And then I would just echo a comment I heard from Barbara, which is, I think to be explicit that if we don't take the opportunity to say trees and explain that, it will get missed. And I remember in that presentation, they explicitly said, well, we'll give the context. Well, let's have it embedded in this, right? And I imagine to earlier comments, right, that there may be some resistance to it, but I think we can use our voice to encourage that it needs to be better. But all of that comes to thank you again, Bruce. I really do appreciate this. And I know you're taking notes from all of us.
Thank you, Megan. Jen, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating your conversation and that last time, the advice given the last meeting. And there's a kind of a parallel track happening with park staff of this Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland project. And I wanted to share with you what I've heard communicated in that forum. And that it related to what you're all saying about the context, like what does parks do? We need to tell people what parks does in the first place. That is not just parks, it's trees all over the place. So related to that, what I've heard is there is an apprehension about leading. I think Adrian brought this up, or some confusion maybe even, I would say, around asking the right questions or telling people what they should value. So the project does not want to tell people what they should value. And I personally think that is the right way to do that. That's what we need to hear from the community, especially the BIPOC community that has been historically eliminated from having that role, telling government what to do. But it seems, at the same time, what I'm hearing you say, and I personally agree with, is you need to tell people what it is they have the opportunity to value before you can ask them what to value. So I just want to communicate that, because that seems to be a challenge at some measure of historic park or Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, that those are two separate things and both are important. And saying, here's what we do now, what we're responsible for, is not the same as saying, and you should tell us that that's important.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So we have about 5 minutes left. And one of the things that the policy committee was hoping to get out of this is to get a vote from the UFC for us to send the letter. Before I do that, I know we haven't had a chance to hear from Leah or Damon or Greg on this. I'm wondering if any of the three of you would like to comment on this before we make a motion. Damon? Yeah, you're muted, Damon.
Sorry, I unmuted and yeah, let go of the space bar. I haven't been able to locate the letter. How was it transmitted to us?
It's with the agenda on the bottom of that email.
And then Brian just put something in the chat, I see.
Yeah, if you click on that link and then go to the meeting materials section of that page, you'll see it. You'll see a link there.
Okay. So what I would like to suggest, and this is kind of the way we've been kind of doing business with these letters in the past, because we only meet once a month, is I would like to propose that we take the letter that you saw in the meeting minutes and allow Bruce and myself to incorporate comments that we heard today, and then send off this letter with Vivek's signature. Or I don't know how long Vivek's going to be gone, but if we're not able to reach him, I can, I guess, sign as policy chair, but send it along to Adina Long. So I'm wondering if we're okay with, if someone would like to make a motion to that effect.
I'm happy to motion what you just said.
Okay. Get to Greg's question in just a sec. Can we get a second first and then we'll.
Second.
Okay, Adrian second. Greg had to put something in the comment or chat. And you're muted.
I'm sorry to have missed such a crucial meeting. I am in the process of trying to download the recording, but I'd love to see the actual questions or the PowerPoint, if those are standalone things that could be sent to us. And, you know, I have to say, these kinds of surveys drive parks activities as a bureau for years. So it's really important. If it's like something that says, you know, what do you use most or what do you value? And it's playgrounds and swimming pools and a walk in a park. Trails actually historically, which was my job at Parks, rated very high. But I gotta say, given the reaction we've had to everything we do about trees, including the South Park walks, trees would be right up there. So if you don't ask the question, as Barbara said, you're not going to get the answer. I think this letter is critical. And if they have to separate their data into before this question was asked and after, I'm fine with that. I think any statistician could do that. That's
Okay,
it.
great. Thanks, Greg. So we have like less than a minute here. I think we're ready for a vote. All those in favor, either raise your real hand or your virtual hand. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous of those present today. Thank you very much. And I think that concludes the regular portion of the UFC meeting. And at this point, we'll turn it over to Barbara because we have an appeal coming up. So thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. And Bruce, let's plan on getting together tomorrow morning and wrapping up this letter.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Daniel.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, thank you.
Done, Daniel. Thank you.
Let's take a 5-minute break. It's been going for a few hours. The hearing will start at 11:20.
Thanks, Brian. Hey, Angie, how are you? Good, how's it going? Great. Hey, I got
Can anyone hear me? This is Jeff Dickey, the appellant.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, good. I'm not very well versed in Zoom, so.
Well, even when you're well versed, it has its moments, so understood.
Okay.
Okay, it's 11:20, so I'm going to get started. Welcome, Jeffrey. Is it okay if I call you Jeffrey?
Yeah, you can call me Jeff, actually.
Jeff. Okay. Welcome. Jeff, we appreciate your time and effort in coming to talk about the trees along your street. And so just to let you know, we're volunteers who all have expertise and experience with various urban forestry trees and issues. And you probably know this already, but just to go over it and for the record, the appeals board is an error correcting body. So we will decide whether the city forester erred in applying the standards and the review factors governing the trees according to the city code. So it's not about liking or disliking or anything like that. It's about the city code. And the board will decide with the city forester unless it's demonstrated that the city forester's decision is in error. We will consider testimony from you, Jeff, and from the city staff, and observations by the members of the appeals board. And we may, discuss back and forth among the members of the appeals board. There are 4 of us here today, and or maybe 3 of us. There are 3 of us here today. So the board will either affirm the city forester's decision or reverse the city forester's decision based on whether an error was made in applying the code. The hearings are open to the public, but there will be no public comment. So just so you know that. So the appeals board is responsible for reviewing and deciding appeals of tree permit decisions. And the appeals are considered against the applicable Title 11 standards and review factors for that type of appeal. So during the hearing, we'll start with the city, and our tree inspector will present info stating the section of the code used for the decision and the basis for the appeal, for the denial. And you, Jeff, as the appellant, will address the section of code wherein the error occurred and note specifically how the city forester erred in applying that code. And the appeals board will not make an independent decision, but will decide whether the city forester made an error in their decision. So, we may ask questions, we may discuss, we may deliberate as the appeals board. You can certainly ask questions of the city, etc. So then I will call for a motion after some discussion has been held and a second, and the appeals board will vote. And once the vote occurs, there's no further discussion of the appeal because the vote has occurred and the decision is made. So, and at that point, the hearing is closed and my gavel is missing. Anyway, there is no further appeal within the city, but you, Jeff, may consult an attorney regarding any legal remedies that you may wish to pursue. So let me just start out by asking the appeal board members if anyone, and please do it verbally because at the moment I don't have everybody's screen up. Did anybody make a site visit?
No.
I did not.
Okay.
I did not.
Thank you, Damon. I did not either. And Megan, I'm guessing that silence means you did not also.
I said no. I think you maybe just didn't hear me.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I didn't hear you. So site visits are not required. They can be done or not. So is there any conflict of interest with this appeal?
No.
And no, Barbara.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then any ex parte contact?
No.
And no as well.
No, yeah. And so I think we'll start with the city and hear the presentation. And hi, Anil.
Hi, everyone.
Would you?
Hi, everyone.
Would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, please. Brian, can you please put slides on? All right, so hi, everyone again. We are here to discuss tree removal appeal for
Anil,
500.
Anil, for the record, would you clarify what species of trees these are?
Yeah, these are red maple trees, and they're like 20, 17, and 20-inch DBH. And they were denied removal because trees were functioning street trees, and they're healthy, relatively healthy, so they were denied removal based on their overall conditions. So next slide, please. So we received appeal after a decision was made to deny trees, and the main objection was that tree maintenance creates unreasonable burden for property owner, and the reasons provided are that root systems of trees have caused and will cause buckling, openings, and cracks in sidewalk, creating tripping hazard and other safety hazard for pedestrians and people in wheelchairs, and also that continuous cost for sidewalk repairs creates unreasonable burden for property owner, and that continuous sidewalk maintenance cost significantly exceeds the value of the trees, and that anything less than tree removal will not substantially alleviate the dangerous conditions. So next slide, please. Our decision was based on city codes, and I just want to present the relevant city codes that were kind of guiding us in our decision. So code 114040B2 is one of the review factors for a B-type removal permit. And it states that in absence of extraordinary circumstance, the city will not permit the removal of healthy functional street trees, and that maintenance of or replacement of sidewalks and curbs, removal of litter or minor inconveniences do not constitute such extraordinary circumstance. In the phone conversation after denial, I have explained that the urban forestry in compliance with these entitled level does not approve the removal of the healthy trees, and a property owner has been informed about PBOT sidewalk repair permitting process and a root pruning inspection as a part of that process. So next slide, please. So this is another code that talks more specifically about sidewalk and curb, which is focusing on repairs, and says that curbs or sidewalk, when they are damaged and they are damage caused by maintenance of a tree that is kind of involved in it, it will be treated as any other sidewalk repair in accordance with provision of Title 11. So the removal of such a trees would be kind of on discretion of responsible engineer, which is in this case sidewalk inspector, and city forester together. So if any permitting is needed, it will be kind of in cooperation these two kind of bureaus. And then also which I did not highlight here, it says that city may require alternative construction methods to be used in order to retain the tree. So next slide, please. So I went in preparation for, of course, this presentation. I went to Portland Bureau of Transportation website to review available information regarding sidewalk repair, and I found out that there are actually two main avenues of sidewalk repair. One of them is the mandatory sidewalk repair. This sidewalk repair starts with PBOT, where they go out and inspect the sidewalks, and if they find that the sidewalks is out of compliance, then the property owner adjacent to the adjacent property owner is kind of notified and given time to repair sidewalk. So on their website, it's clearly stated that City of Portland's sidewalk program oversees the maintenance of city sidewalks, curbs, and corners, regardless of what's causing factor. So in our two previous repairs that were documented by property owner, both of these repairs were actually mandatory sidewalk repairs where the sidewalk was found to be not in compliance with safety standards, and then the property owner was mandated to repair the sidewalks at those two times. Next, please. So with the application for removal of the trees that we received, there were no actually any evidence that this time around the Transportation Bureau inspector was involved, and there were no actually estimates of the sidewalk was out of compliance. So that clearly means that this is not mandatory sidewalk repair. And on the website, on PBOT website, one of the really things that stand out is that the statement that I outlined in the bottom. It says that if you have not received a notice requiring sidewalk repair, which is mandatory sidewalk repair, but wish to submit an application for repair or reconstruction, please follow the link. So this is pretty much straightforward and explains two things: that the proactive sidewalk maintenance requests should be addressed to the types of sidewalk repair programs, and also that any sidewalk maintenance starts with PBOT and not with urban forestry, which is kind of a little bit, not self-explanatory maybe for people, but that's the way that things are organized. So please, next slide. So as part of sidewalk repair, once it starts, there's a root pruning inspection. Sometimes, of course, if it involves trees, then it's kind of mandatory, and then it's guided through the PBOT. PBOT directs, all of these repair processes, and if there is a roots exposed, then root pruning inspection will take place, and then within usually 2 business days. And at that time, urban forestry tree inspector will visit site and mark the roots that are allowed to be cut with orange spray paint. And also at that time, tree inspector will issue root pruning permit, which will be in accordance to our kind of standards in order to reduce further damage to repair sidewalk. And also tree inspectors will determine which roots can be cut based on conditions of the tree, and also to ensure that it will not significantly impact the health or structural stability of the tree. Next, please. So this is just summary of costs that were submitted from previous 2 repairs. So it comes to like $857.27. And as shown as it will be shown in next photos, the trees that were denied were not really contributing factor in these repairs. And since they are not contributing factors in previous repairs, they cannot be considered as a burden for a property owner. Next slide, please. So these are the trees that are in question. There are 3 red maple trees. And then further review after we received appeal has determined that that red maple tree further west, the one first in the slide, will be approved for removal because it was extensively pruned for street light clearance and has unbalanced canopy. And there are also some minor decays in the trunk that are not visible on this photo. So the trees highlighted in yellow are the ones that are actually still denied still. Next slide, please. So this is a photo of the tree that's the first tree that we're going to be approving for removal. And as you can see, that there were a large surface area that was repaired in previous attempts. I don't know which year exactly, but one of these years. And then you can see two things. One thing, that there's really no significant sidewalk damage in time of mine inspection, at least. And then also that the tree has not been removed to repair sidewalk. So we can actually retain tree and repair sidewalk at the same time. Next, please. This, I forgot to mention, this is corner lot and has two frontages. So the one that we just seen is on South California side, and this is South Virginia frontage. So as you can see on this frontage, there is also a large section of the sidewalk that was repaired in previous years. And as you can see as well, two ash trees are still remaining. They are not removed, and so they can definitely coexist with sidewalks. Next, please. So these are two trees in questions that were denied, and as we can see, there is no really significant repairs that were taking place in the past. And then, because of that, these trees were not contributing factor in a previous cost or previous repairs, I should say. Next, please. So there is we discussed all of these repair options with with the property owner in our phone conversations, both me and Rick Faber, and we introduced all of these ideas. But there's really nice brochure on Portland Bureau of Transportation website that is downloadable, and this is that sidewalk repair manual. And I just want to go briefly to kind of review some repair options that we were suggesting to property owner. Next slide, please. One on is grinding. For sometimes it's feasible to kind of just grind parts of sidewalk to kind of even up and smoothen surfaces. Next, please. Some ramping overs, another alternative that is widely used in the city. Next, please. Sidewalk reductions, where it's feasible. Sidewalks can be reduced in the size to accommodate for more space for roads to grow and develop. Next, please. And then radius blockouts. That's another alternative that is available through and PBOT is also advertising those options for repair. Next, please. Finally, I just want to kind of summarize. We made some recommendations as far as further steps, and the property was clearly informed about all of these pruning permits and root pruning options, sidewalk repair options, and the property owners was advised to contact PBOT regarding sidewalk damage concerns. So that's about it.
Thank you, Emil. Jeff, do you want to tell us what you see in the trees outside your house and about the information that you've provided?
Yes, thank you. I want to first start by acknowledging the citizen member of the board and the work that you do on behalf of all of us here in Portland. So despite or regardless of the outcome of this hearing, I will carry that sentiment through. So thank you guys, and thank you, Brian and Emil. But just by way of background, this issue and my tree removal application came about because I have had two arborists here that noticed something called occlusion of bark on the trees. And that's since you all have experience in trees, I think it's probably a term familiar with you, but because the city or because Portland General Electric hires Aspen to come out and do pruning in a certain way, these trees are underneath PG&E power lines. And so over the course of the 20 years that I've lived here, they've done what's called a V cut, which cuts out the center of the tree. And then it grows new roots, and that causes the occlusion of bark. And because I think, as Anil mentioned, the imbalance in the tree's canopies, because of the way that they've been pruned over the years, it seems to be a safety hazard, especially the risk of some of the center tree, especially falling into my home and on top of my home. And according to two arborists that have more than combined 45 years experience, both came of that opinion, that I contacted Portland General Electric directly to make them aware of the situation and the concerns. And Portland General Electric was very responsive, I'm happy to say. It sent out an arborist, Elizabeth Weaver, to do the inspection. And she agreed that there is an issue with the tree. And moreover, she agreed that PG&E would pay for the removal and take care of the removal. It would also provide vouchers for me to choose trees and replant those trees. But the only thing that it won't do is that PG&E doesn't want to be burdened with the continued maintenance of the tree. So the one sort of quid pro quo, I don't want to, that word has a funny connotation now, I think, because of the former administration. But anyway, it was sort of a, so if they were going to do that for me, they were asking for me to apply for the permit. And the reason being, and I don't know this for certain, but apparently if PG&E applies for the tree removal under its program with the Department of Urban Forestry, then it's responsible for the maintenance and the replanting of the new trees. Well, it's responsible, I should say rather, for the planting of the new trees and then their maintenance. I don't know, sorry, I had another call and I don't know if you missed what I was saying, but so Portland General Electric, as conveyed to me from them, would be responsible for the replanting and then the maintenance of those newly replanted trees. I don't think in perpetuity, but it seems like, I mean, the board or the commission would be able to probably inform me of how long PG&E, how long it'll for maintenance of those trees. So PG&E, I submitted my first permit, and Emil came out and looked at the trees, and he didn't find a particular issue or concern with the occlusion of bark. And then at which time my application was essentially denied, but I don't recall which person sort of gave me leave to amend regarding the removal application process and the relevant code. So the other issue with these trees is, I mean, they're not on the permitted tree list. They're red elms. Their root systems are known to be pervasive, invasive, and destroy property. In my case, I've had in the past 10 years, I think it was 2012, and then again in 2014, PBOT did cite my property for trip hazards on my sidewalk, which then I had to Emil, I'm sorry, stated it was $7,500. I think it was a little bit higher than that, but I'll call it $7,500. Regardless, in the same areas that Emil showed you photos of, I don't think that he showed you photos that provided truly accurate angles, because those newly replaced sections of sidewalk alone are already out of compliance, and that's because of the trees. So Emil's correct. In some cases, you can sand the curbs and make them flat. But I have did you have a question? I count approximately 20. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Jeffrey, I think we've got copies of everything you sent to the city. And
Okay,
so
good.
we're gonna run into our time frame here.
Okay, I'll throttle it back and get to my point.
Yeah. So did you finish your absolute point?
No, I mean, that was by way of a background. So to get to my point, I mean, I submit that there's been a misapplication of the city code as applied by Emil. And I guess there's two rubrics where the city can consider my remote date, that whether the maintenance of the trees creates an unreasonable burden. And I think that's under type B. And under type A, it's the code states that it's a fact-based inquiry, and that the alternatives exceed, or the value of the tree would exceed the cost of the alternatives, and that's the constant and continual replacement of and the maintenance of my sidewalks.
So Jeffrey,
yeah.
we've
I feel the
read.
code's been misapplied. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we've read all the material that you sent in and appreciate that. And I'd like to start out the questioning, and thank you for that. And thank you for the background information.
Sorry, yeah, for the long-windedness.
Yeah, I'd like to start out by asking Emil if he saw the bark inclusion and what his opinion was of it.
When I was there was tree was just freshly pruned, and there is really nothing standing out. If there are any bark inclusion, which I didn't notice any significant ones, they must be minor. Limbs are not really exposed to really any other factors, because the trees were just pruned in the time of my inspection.
Okay, thank you for that. So Megan and Damon, do you have any questions for Anil or Jeffrey? For Jeff?
I really don't have any questions. I just wanted to comment to Emil and say thank you for the informative presentation on sidewalks and trees, and I've actually learned a little bit more about the sidewalk process. As the trees, I'm kind of looking here on Google Maps Street View at the trees, because they offer a little bit better view from some more angles. These red maples, it's kind of a normal growth pattern that they develop, with many times with multiple leaders heading up like that, which some can be kind of tight. But I think you may have gotten advice from both the PGE Forester and possibly from other arborists that may have been a bit slanted towards secondary motives, PGE, in the idea that if they don't have trees there, they don't have to maintain them. And the other arborists obviously would benefit monetarily from taking the trees out. In my opinion, you could probably maintain the structure or of these trees pretty easily with some proper pruning. And Emil is right in the sidewalk manual has a ton of different strategies to help avoid further root damage and actually alternative sidewalk construction techniques, which I think are very good.
I had a question for Jeff and a question for Emil. Jeff, my question is, aside from Asplund, who right there, they're maintaining for power line clearance, have you had any other pruning done outside of what they're kind of doing with a very specific pruning intent in mind? Have you had other arborists out that actually have pruned that prune the trees themselves?
Yeah, so I haven't, but I pruned them myself. And so when Anil says that the trees were pruned, I live on a street that's just off Macadam Avenue, and there is a barn grill at the end of the street, and we get lots of truck and commercial traffic, which depending on the size of the truck and how close they get to the tree, they've torn limbs off the tree. So I think the pruning that Anil is referring to was the removal of some limbs and risk to people. Professional arborists come out and prune the trees because since they are below PG&E or below surrounding and above PG&E lines,
Okay.
PG&E does the maintenance on those trees.
Okay, so just to summarize, other than
Moreover, yeah, I believe it takes a special.
Barbara, do you want to make your comment quick?
I was just going to say, yeah, to summarize, so other than Asplund, no certified arborists, given that Asplund may or may not have had a certified arborist there, no other certified arborists have looked at the trees. Is that yes or no?
That's a no. Two sort of.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did consulting work prior to becoming disabled.
So my internet is getting a little spotty here, but I'm gonna stop you there. And I think we're ready. If Megan and Damon have no further questions for the city or for the appellant.
My quick question, Barbara, it was just for Emil, I'll try to be quick, is Emil, my assumption knowing the code is that were the decision made to deny removal today, that a future permit could be put in for removal were the situation of the trees to decline in the future.
Yeah, if the conditions of tree deteriorate, of course, we would consider removal option, but conditions are right now pretty good. So, removal would not be the first option, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I also just want to add the comment that even though those trees that genus and species may not be on the current tree list, they are now part of the canopy of the city, and that makes them important for the work that they do for stormwater and many other things. So the list of permitted trees changes, but once the tree is there and established, it's part of the canopy. So so I'm gonna call for a motion.
Motion to uphold the denial of the permit.
Okay, Megan, or myself, does one of us want a second?
I will second it.
I'll second it. Oh, okay. So it appears that we have a vote. And so we have a motion to stay with the city forester's decision, and we have a second. Do you want to show by hands whether you agree with that motion? So
is that
Jeff,
a question for me?
No, I was going to say, so the appeals board, we have a quorum, and the appeals board has voted to deny your appeal because of the conditions that are there now, right now. And you might want to approach PBOT and talk to them about voluntary and all of that. But it appears that the city has not notified you about any changes needed to the sidewalk right there. So your appeal has been denied. And again, if you should choose, you can seek legal remedies. And with that, I'm closing the hearing. Thank you. So I don't, I think Jeffrey, that we understand. We all have sidewalks too. But yeah, so there you go. It's not I think this is not ready for any kind of issue because of the current sidewalk conditions. And this is all, this is not part of the hearing. I'm just letting you know that we appreciate you coming in, and we appreciate your concern. Care.
The only, I don't know if you just in the meeting before, but I did pose to Brian and asked to have it made a part of your agenda. The homeowner may assume the responsibility and under its program for the trees. So PG&E submitted the application. Could it suppose like it contracts with other entities to do the maintenance, and then be the only stick with PG on its own, because it also wants the trees removed, or pollarded is the other option.
Yeah, that would be a question. What I would recommend that you do is contact the urban forestry staff. The agenda for today was full, and it's oftentimes gets full, so we already have some background on what we'll be talking about next month. But you might ask them how that might be done, if it's ever been looked at, what the process would be to propose it. You can, write them a letter based on what they say. I don't work for the city, so I'm not a good person to answer that question. And I think that is best done offline.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, everyone. Again, I appreciate